Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meat success? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jared Hawken, the founder of ChopLocal. Each episode of this podcast features interviews with farmers and butchers who have built successful direct-to-consumer meat businesses, and they're going to share their secrets for success with you. From actionable tips to inspiring stories, this podcast has ingredients you will need to succeed in the meat business. After the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social. And check out the rest of our educational resources at ChopLocalUniversity.com. Now, let's turn it over to my business partner, Katie, to get started.
Before we get into this next episode, I wanted to let you know about one of our other resources that we offer. If you are in a hurry to see meat marketing results fast, then the Meat Commerce Essentials course is perfect for you. It covers everything that you need to know to sell meat online successfully, and it's presented in short video snippets to get you the info that you need to put into action as quickly as possible. For a limited time, we're offering our podcast listeners $100 off the course using coupon code POD100. That's POD100. Just visit ChopLocalUniversity.com to find the course and be sure to enter POD100 at checkout. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Meat Success Podcast. I'm Katie Olthoff, the co-founder of ChopLocal and ChopLocal University, and I'm really excited for today's episode. I actually have two people joining me. So I have Sierra Long, who is our marketing specialist at ChopLocal. Say hi, Sierra, so they can hear your voice and recognize it.
Hi, thanks for having me on today.
And then we have Dr. Leona Sue from the University of Illinois. And funny story, the three of us attended the same conference last fall. It was called the National Ag Marketing Summit. And there were breakout sessions throughout the summit. And Sierra did a presentation during a breakout session about social media, which you guys, if you listen to the podcast, you've seen that, or you can find it on our YouTube channel. It's basically what she shared in the presentation. The conference organizers put Dr. Leona Sue in another breakout room talking about farmers using social media at the exact same time. These were on different floors of the hotel, and so I went to Dr. Sue, like half of hers, and heard half of her presentation, and then I ran upstairs to hear half of Sierra's because I thought that I should support her, and take a couple pictures. But we thought it was kind of funny that they were both talking about social media in different rooms at the exact same time, and they did not get to hear each other's presentation. So since November, we've been saying that we want Dr. Sue to meet with us, and she said she would share with us her research. And we decided that we would do this really efficiently and do it on the podcast so she can share her research with Sierra and with all of you. She also has some upcoming research opportunities for our listeners or viewers if you want to take part in it. And I believe there is a small stipend related if you take part in it. She's shaking her head yes. So, okay, now that I've rambled on for a little bit, Dr. Sue, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you start out and tell everybody just a little bit about your background, and really curious as to how you decided to start researching and studying farmers' use of social media.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Leona Sue. I'm now a faculty member at the Department of Advertising at the University of Illinois. So what I do is basically to understand, what is the best way to persuade people to make those persuasion or marketing or promotional strategies to be more effective. So one of my areas of interest for research is to understand how people or how businesses, especially small businesses, can use social media and other technologies. Right now I focus a lot on AI tools. How can we leverage those different digital tools in order to boost their marketing efficiency as well as effectiveness? So at the beginning, I actually did a lot at the beginning is more with those more, I think, business entities, but at a smaller scale. For example, I look at like a culture meat industry, how they have been kind of like talking about their product, right? And then how do they promote it and how do the public respond to it? I also study like a vertical farming industry, and right now I'm also interested in the plant-based industry as well. So kind of like looking at the agriculture industry in general. And then while I was doing research, I realized it's actually for the traditional farming industry, actually doing digital marketing is also being perceived as a huge barrier. So some of the
Yes.
data, I think from USDA shows that I think 85% of the farms they have internet access, but only 29% of them will actually do digital marketing. So you can see the huge gap there is people have access to the internet. They know how to use the internet and they probably use it for different perspectives, but just not all of them or the majority of them still not using the internet or different digital channels to do online marketing.
Sorry, I'll stop you there. I want to repeat that number. So you said 85% of farmers have access to the internet, but only 29%. Was that right?
Are using online marketing. Yeah.
Online marketing. Yeah, I think that that totally is in line with what Sierra and I see every day when we talk to farmers. You know, they have the internet, they use it to check email or to communicate, things like that. Maybe they use social media personally, but then when they start to think about how they're going to use it in their marketing, it becomes a lot more intimidating. Like you said, there is a barrier there.
Yeah, and actually, I think based on what you observe, it's totally making sense. Like, and it aligns well with the data. Is there's a survey? I think they were surveying ecotourism industry or like the community, and I think 80% of the respondents in the survey they actually mentioned that they find marketing extremely challenging. So they believe it's really hard for them. And I think lots of them point out they need help with specific marketing plans, and they also mention social media marketing is like a huge area they need help with, which is not surprising because I think farmers are amazing. They are taking lots of different roles at the same time. They are farmers, they have to have those field knowledge, but at the same time, you expect them to manage their farm, to sell products, and to boost the sales, and to kind of talk and then interact with the consumer. So there's a lot for farmers to do. So that's kind of the time I realized this is a community if I can actually kind of get involved in and then kind of apply what I learned and also to study more, there's a great chance, I can apply what I learned to help this community to really use the tool more efficiently and effectively, and then to show them what I say is more like evidence-based marketing like strategies, right? So we use data to show you that it is working, and based on what we observed, what we tested, it's going to be effective. So to make them feel more comfortable and also hopefully easier to adopt those strategies. Yeah.
I love that. It fits in so well with our mission.
Like Katie said, that's really interesting, and it's really cool that you have all of that data and you're gathering all of that data, because we've certainly seen that with the farmers, ranchers, and butcher shops that we worked with, but we didn't necessarily have that data. So I'm really interested to kind of dive into some of the specific research that you've done and kind of walk us through that. And what do you think our audience, farmers, butcher shops, ranchers, should specifically walk away with, and what maybe they can implement based on the research that you've done?
Yeah, and I think there are a couple of interesting things. So the first thing I think is more general kind of rule of thumb is go out there, right? Be on social media. If you are still hesitant or you're still not sure, I think it's a great timing, and also you should be there because lots of research has shown that it's effective, it helps. There may be different strategies associated, but going out there have lots of benefits. For example, your exposure is increased. You help to direct traffic back to your website to even visit your farms. You develop loyalty. By having those online interactions, you actually build your online community. You actually grow that kind of a sense of community, and then you will develop loyal fans. And then it also overall, ultimately, it will help boost your sales. So I think research has suggested that no, being on social media is effective and is beneficial. And based on my data, it's actually, even if we know it matches what we talked about so far, it's like we know it's effective, but for farmers, it is challenging. And actually, lots of farmers are still not there yet. So based on the kind of a large scale data we do is we analyze Facebook data and social media data from like farms from 5 Midwestern states. And then what we find out is that actually only about 60% of those Midwestern farms from the 5 states, they were on Facebook. and only 7% of them are on X, and I think about 24% are on Instagram.
These are farms that are selling direct to consumer.
That's a good point because we collected those farms data based on the list of members associated with farmers markets. So we go to farmers market association to find out the farms, and then because we were trying to generate that list, and maybe someone can point me out to the right database, but it's just for me, I couldn't find that database. So I had to find a way to scratch the data to generate that list for myself. So we decided to go with those like farmers market association. So everyone I believe listed under there is consumer facing.
Perfect. So farmers market farmers, that they might be selling meat, but this also included people that are selling vegetables or flowers or eggs or things like that too. I just wanted to make sure that we understood that we weren't talking about, no, in the Midwest, we have our corn and soybean farmers, but if they're not selling direct to consumer, they're not included in these numbers.
Not in those numbers, but also interesting is I think I don't have real data to support it, but based on my conversations with those like non-consumer facing, like entities or farms, they are, I think, even rarely to be on social media because there's really no such need. So yeah, so I feel like if we actually ask those farms or business, it's less likely the numbers will just be even lower, I think.
So I'm really curious, based on your research and your findings, are you seeing any common threads of like types of content that is the most effective, or maybe is the easiest for farmers to create, which makes it effective? Do you have any thoughts on or direction when it comes to specifically creating content?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So we actually go collect the data. We focus only on Facebook because that seems to be the primary social media platform that farmers are on. So we went to farms like Facebook. So we collected, I think, about data around 1,000 farms. So we go to their Facebook, and then we were able to collect 70,000 unique posts, and then we look at 38,000 images they posted. So those are kind of like aggregate findings. So it's not one specific farm, but it's more than about 900 to 1,000 farms-ish in Midwest.
If I remember right, you said that you have your research assistants that went and looked at these tens of thousands of posts and images.
We asked because I think based on lots of different rules like those different social media platforms have, so we have to kind of have our assistant to actually manually to look through the data. So it's lots of effort. So we appreciate all of the funding and support.
Well, we appreciate your work too, because I can't even imagine. I mean, you talked about AI tools. Maybe that's the next step is we could figure out an AI tool to do it. But I can't even imagine what that was like. So
it's exciting, and I think the data is really rich, and it was so much fun to look at those data. Honestly, you can see how farmers are being so creative and generated different kind of content. And we were trying to kind of characterize and classify the content. There's just so many. And what we have conclusions. So just keep in mind those conclusions more like aggregate findings. So there might be some other interesting, more nuanced findings, but based on the data we have, it's probably not showing up. So, but at least based on our data, we found out one thing that really works very well and across both, because we look at the textual post as well as the visual images. So we kind of look at them separately. So we do have like findings from the two separate like context. But agritourism, content that's related to agritourism, that seems to be performing really well for both like visual and the text messaging. So like agritourism we focus only on the text because for the visuals it's really much harder. We classify it into other categories. But at least for text, agritourism did really well, like in terms of boosting post likes, boosting post shares, and boosting post comments. So like whenever it mentions more agritourism or farm visiting, if you talk about those on-farm activities, I think audiences are really excited, and they are showing their engagement across all different type of metrics.
Interesting. So when you're saying that agritourism, it's different from showing like behind the scenes on the farm. This is more specifically like they are inviting people to the farm for an event or
They are more talking about, yeah, and then they are like ecotourism specific activities. For example, like farm stay or orchard visits or like a pumpkin patch. We see a lot like during the fall season. So you talk like you invite people to go onto the farm for those on-farm activities that more like a one-day stuff. So ecotourism did really well, but Katie, you have a really good point is about those farm operation or kind of like things on farms. Actually, we find out is for audiences are also very interested in two different like contents. One is farm market operation. So they are like whenever you talk about, for example, you say farm is open at what time and or when you can find us, like today a specific like farmers market, we're going to have a booth there. People are interested in those information. Also, I think people are also very interested in farm lives. So if you have any information talking about like your orchard and you show pictures of orchard, or if you show them pictures of your farm animals on the barns, on the ranch, people are super excited about those. So for both like a farm or like operations side of information as well as farm lives, people really like them and engage them with them very often. And it shows it both like a textual information and the visual information. So no matter it is in the visual format or if it is in the text format, people love those. However, one caveat is for those two type of posts, people are only liking and commenting, but not sharing. It is interesting because for ecotourism, is people will like it, commenting on it, and share it. But when it's coming to farm life or farm market operation, especially farm life. Like I think farm market operation is you don't really see any effects on share, so you are not seeing more or less. It's just there's no difference. But for farm life, is actually the sharing is getting less compared to if you are selling products. So in other words, people really like those information. They comment on it and they're excited about this. They like it when it's about farm life. They don't share such information. And they tend to share less, actually. Yeah.
I can, as a social media user, I mean, Sierra, tell me what you think, but that sort of makes sense to me. Like, I know when I see local events on Facebook, a lot of times I think of somebody that, like, oh, my sister would really like this, or my friend Meredith would really like this, and I send it to them, you know, I share it with them. And so that makes sense that there would be that share there when it's related to like an event, or like you said, we're going to be at the farmer's market booth. I might tag my sister and be like, oh, we should go get some flowers today or something. But I can understand, I love to see the animal photos and I will probably like that and maybe comment on it. But I don't have the same, you know, there's no necessarily a reason for me to share it unless it's just because I want to support the farm.
Then that's exactly what we found. And what we also found out, you mentioned about the event, which is a little bit different from market operation because in our definition, so again, it's our definition. Because we're trying to classify content into specific categories, so it's easier to help us find the patterns and to give conclusions. So the farm market operation focuses more on the like hours, like where you will see us, where you'll find us. But we also have a category that's focusing more on the event. For example, you show people the booth, you show people the thing that's from the visual side, or you show people about like specific information related to when you are going to have an activity today. So we find out, as you say, if it's a textual one, people are going to like it. If it's more like a visual one, people like to share those contents. So we find out overall, I think just in general, ecotourism, farm market operation, farm life, as well as events, those are really good at connecting with audiences, your target audiences, with potential consumers. And what we find out, two categories, they are a little bit trickier, right? One is what we said is the special day. So special day is like when it's coming to specific holidays, right? You will probably post something related to the holiday. You will make like, for example, if it's Christmas, if it's Thanksgiving, you are trying to make connection to the holiday. And it turns out if it is in written, right? So if you write something, people actually like it. And we find out is people like it, people commented on it, although they don't share it, right? However, if your special day related content is in the more visual format, so maybe you post a Santa, or if you're trying to use pictures to kind of engage with your consumers, like people don't like it. Like overall engagement is coming down. Like everything is coming down. So in other words, it seems like when those more holiday specific or special day specific information is visually presented, people tend to show less interest and overall interest across all board, like all three type of metrics that we look at, likes, shares, and comments, is all decreasing. But if it's in writing, people seem to feel more and feel connected more and more likely to engage.
That is so interesting. Dr. Sue, you're seeing posts that have no visual with them whatsoever.
There will be like posts like without any visuals. I think it's interesting is one interesting, so I can talk about this now because of things since we talk about visuals. And what we find out really interesting is the quality of visuals actually matter, right? So what we find out is when we were doing an analysis, we find out there was a really weird pattern is using visual actually hurts engagement. That's like an overall finding we have. Then we were like, it's too surprising, right? It doesn't match what we imagine, and then it doesn't really meet the literature. So what we look at is that we further look into the data, and we find out what is working here or what's going on here is if we separate the data or the visual data into two piles. One is coming from those more bigger accounts. So they have a much higher, we use the analysis approaches, so we analyze their image quality. So they have a much higher image quality. Versus another pile of like visuals coming from those like smaller accounts or accounts with less followers. And we analyze the image quality, it tend to have a much lower visual quality in terms of like color richness, brightness, and then clearness or sharpness. So all of the different metrics we use. And what we find out is if your image has a higher quality, then your engagement increases. However, if your image quality is low, then it actually hurts the engagement. So it's possible it's because when people post about special day, we didn't really test it, but I'm hypothesizing or guessing is special day images lots of times is of lower quality, right? You probably find a random picture from the internet. So it's probably people overall find it less engaging. I find a really important takeaway is visuals are important, but people care a lot about the quality of the visual you are posting. Yep.
So maybe something that our audience can take away from that is if you have a great photo, then it's good to use it. But if you have a lower quality photo, you should still make the post, but you would be better off with just doing text and no visuals.
That's a great point. Yep.
I think that's a really cool nugget that I think our audience can use is even if you don't feel like you have a great photo, you can still post, but only use visuals when it's a really good photo.
You know, I can't remember if we've talked about it on the podcast or if we have a video on YouTube, but I know we have some resources somewhere. I'll have to find them so that I can send them out in an email. We have some resources about taking good farm photography that Sierra and I have pulled together. I've talked about this before, maybe not on the podcast, but pigs that are outside a lot of times are in dirt. I get it. That's where they are. But you've got a brown pig and brown dirt. And sometimes if they're in like a forest, a tree type area, then there's brown trees and leaves around them. And that was the first example I thought of like there's not a lot of bright colors. There's not a lot of contrast. Like it's really hard to make those pictures look really high quality. That's just the way that it is. It also made me think of food photos, and I don't know if you categorize that, Dr. Sue, and I apologize I keep pulling you off track, but we'll come back to but like food photos, I think a beautiful mouth-watering food photo obviously makes me go, oh, I want that. If my mouth is watering, I want that food. But I've also seen some food photos that aren't fantastic. They're not mouth-watering, and therefore maybe they're not worth using. So
yeah, because I was like checking like my slides because I was checking the results because when you mentioned about food, first is from the farm study, I don't have the food category. I think just farms very unlikely or very rarely post about food, or maybe it's something they could try, but at least from my data, I don't have any data to support it's good or bad. But what's interesting is I do analyze farmers market data, so which is a little bit different from today's context, so I'm not talking about not to confuse the audience. However, when I was doing like analysis of like farmers market data, and what I see is if you actually have those like food products, especially if you have those food dishes as images, overall people show like I think less interest. For farmers market, because they tend to post a lot about food dishes, and based on my findings, I'll double check, is yeah, overall we see decrease in the overall engagement based on our preliminary findings. So we probably have to refine it, but at least based on our preliminary analysis, which is why I'm not talking about it today here, because we're still kind of navigating the data. But at least based on our preliminary analysis, it is showing food dishes, the images, people tend to show less interest in engaging with those pictures. My guess is, as Katie you mentioned, it could be like usually the quality is much lower, the focus is less clear, and people don't really find much of the meaning in those food dishes because it's harder to find a connection to on the other side. Yeah.
So it sounds like in your research you have categorized visuals and text differently. So is there any other interesting information from your research on visuals specifically? Like, I'm wondering if you saw a difference in engagement with static posts versus reels. Facebook is down doing reels now, or like using multiple photos.
I'll be honest, I don't have like additional, kind of extra information related to the visual specific findings because analyzing visuals, it was a little bit challenging for us to like from the perspective of analyzing data because we were using a mix of like human like researchers as well as computers to help us to classify the data. And in the field of classifying data, like automatically, like classifying textual information is much more mature compared to analyzing visual data. So we are still kind of finding out a way to help us efficiently and also accurately to analyze the visual data. So we so far don't really have other findings, but I think based on what we find is at least based on what we find, it's less about the formats because we didn't really go into that route, but at least the content itself is people like something more engaging and they like farm specific content. I think they want us to showcase what your farm is about, to show them like what it's like there, and they also want content to be more inviting, engaging. And like what we find out really interesting is, for example, it's not about visual, but like more about like a textual. The other content that we find out is definitely something worth mentioning is educational content. Like actually seems to be performing less effectively from our findings. So I know sometimes some farms will be making posts that's talking about fun fact or they are associated with some of their, for example, if they are a farm that is making honey, they will talk about bees. They'll talk about how honey is made, and then they will have some those scientific facts related to how honey is made, and then how is that related to bees' lives, or all of those more scientific facts. And people seem to show less interest in those type of content as well. So what we are doing right now is to find, hope, like for example, if having those textual individual consistency, does that help? So because right now we are kind of separating them and when we're doing our analysis, but we are also looking at if there's a way to kind of connect to the two to see the consistency between the two, whether that's helpful.
That is really interesting, the educational piece, because we talk about like behind the scenes farm content, and I feel like there can be a thin line between your farm operations, showing how your animals are raised and things like that, and then veering into the educational content. So have to be careful, I guess, not to get too scientific, you would suggest?
Because I think based on our definition, it's really scientific. So it's less fun and then they talk less about themselves. So I think one of the big takeaway I have like from analyzing data is people like to see farmers to talk themselves. They care a lot about those farm lives, farm specific aspects and perspectives. So even if those scientific facts can be interesting, but I think people care less about those. But I feel like if you can make a spin is, for example, making it highly connected to how your farm is operating or how some of the farm specific management or more scientific fun fact related to your farms, I do think people will be interested because based on our definition is really, you don't really see that connection there. So I feel like overall is what we find out is people care a lot about those farm related or farm specific perspectives.
And that makes sense because I think based off what you're saying and kind of like the pulse I get from social media is people want to be entertained. And I think a lot of consumers find farm life interesting and maybe entertaining. And so I think that's sometimes the challenge, especially with farms, is like, how do we create content that's entertaining? Because wouldn't you say that's kind of the underlining factor that makes consumers care more about those types of posts?
Yeah, I would say I think it's more like their daily life, right? So for example, even if it's just if they go work in the morning, right, and they take a picture of their farm in the morning versus maybe you have a comparison picture versus at night or at the evening. And or maybe like at different days, right? Like when it's stormy versus it's super sunny. I think all those like more daily life operation type of images, people are interested, and even like effects, people are because I think people it's really interesting. It's like people love farm life, and lots of time they don't have experience with the farm life, so they are expecting and they are imagining what a farm life will be like. So those posts and those informations to really show people the way to help them to further understand and also to even feel like they live there themselves too, to experience it themselves. So I would say is I think for farmers was really a great advantage, and I think I think it's actually the advantage they already have is farm life itself is interesting. Maybe I don't know if farmers feel that way, but at least from consumers' perspectives or like general audience, I think they find it really interesting. It's not a life they understand well or they know well, and all of the things featured in farms is not something you see every day. So I think farm already have a very great advantage of what they have. They just have to kind of document it and then to showcase it. I think even just showcasing what they have on farms, people are excited about those. Yeah.
I think a lot of the farmers that we work with maybe don't understand how interested consumers are in their day-to-day life. Point, they're like, oh, I'm just feeding the cows. But that, could be social media gold.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, because based on our findings, it's like really interesting. It's like those very, you think of it more like a daily routine of the farms, right? You're just showcasing one part of the farm. People are excited about those, and then people love those. People engage with those content. So I think it's just for farmers is I think it's really important to kind of know that what they already have is actually enough. They even probably don't have to do extra, just kind of take the photos and kind of document what they have on a daily basis. People love those contents and they build a relationship and then you kind of build that connection.
I love that idea of framing it as documenting what they're doing, not necessarily. I feel like sometimes people get intimidated because they want to overcomplicate it and they think they have to do something particularly trendy or, they have to stop and on purpose do social media. But if you really just think about, again, if you have our photography tips and you can, take a great photo when you see a beautiful sunrise or, when you see a new baby calf or something like that, it just feels like a different process to me, a little bit different mindset. What about in your visual analysis? Did you look at visuals that include someone's face versus visuals that do not include someone's face? And if you haven't, could you please? Because I'm really curious.
I think that's a great point. I think we do have the categories of showing people's faces, just not a lot. And also, we kind of classify, for example, it will be part of farm life, right? If we actually have like farmers showing up, so we classify like under different categories. So, for example, for our farm life, we have photos that only showing tomatoes or apples on the tree. We also have photos showing all of the barn, like animals in the barn. So, I think farm life is just a really general and a big category trying to capture all. So I don't have that, but I do think having those human faces lots of time helps. And I think let me go back to my data. I think I have that for the farmers market data because farmers market actually showcases more about people's face, and we find out overall if from farmers market based on preliminary analysis if you have pictures showing like shoppers and the vendors is going to be more effective in terms of generated engagements. So we don't have that for the farm data, but from the farmers market analysis, we do find that by having those more people or human focused photos, I think it helps with the engagement. Yeah.
Does that make sense with your background in advertising? And, does that kind of mesh with other things that you've learned along the way?
I think like people love those because they can actually see, right? Or it's what you experience in daily life. And when people go onto social media, lots of time they are looking for connections. So when you see photos and with like people versus when you see photos with only, I don't know, trees, for example, the difference is there. You have those different mental connections and your sense of closeness, as well as whether it fulfill your needs to find those social connections too. So I think from what I understand, I think it makes lots of sense, right? People want to see those photos with human featured.
Yeah. I took photos for our local newspaper a few years ago for our town's little festival, and it's called Watermelon Day. And after the parade, we have a local grocery store that brings a semi full of watermelons, and they roll the watermelons down, and then most of the men in the community, yes, it's mostly the men because they're stronger to cut through these watermelons. They all stand there and cut watermelons, and you just get a quarter of a watermelon to walk around and eat, and it's free. And I remember when I was taking photos for the newspaper, they told me, they're like, get a little kid eating the watermelon. That is one of the most important photos that we need every year, is a cute kid with this giant piece of watermelon. And I just think, like, to the example of, we could have a picture of the watermelons on the truck. Okay, fine. But which one draws more of an emotional response? It's cool to see a whole truck full of watermelons. But also, when I said a kid eating this giant slice of watermelon, you both went, oh,
Yeah, exactly. It reminds me of like more in the literature we have in advertising is what we call the cuteness. So cuteness is actually an important factor there, right? Because like, for example, animals actually represent those cuteness, especially if you have those images about newborn animals. I think people love those photos because they just give you like those wow, oh, kind of like a feeling.
So this is something we get asked all the time, and I'm guessing you don't have research on it, but based on this discussion, I want to know your thoughts. People ask us if they should show photos of their baby animals, or if that creates too much tension between the idea of this baby animal is going to grow up and then we're going to eat it. So I just want your gut, like, what do you think based on your advertising background and what you know about farmers and things like that?
I think people love those baby photos for sure because when they see that, they have those kind of like a feelings. But I think it also kind of connects back is what type of business, like, or what type of focus the farm is at, right? So for example, if it's a butcher shop versus if it's an agritourism farm, like showcasing baby photos or baby animal photos give people very different feelings. I think if just for the boosting engagement perspective, it helps. However, if like for the farms, they are more like a butcher side of the business or selling meat products, I think they just have to be careful with their frame. Or maybe, for example, some appreciation there, or more talking about from the different appeals. So when we do advertising, we actually do what we say is like appeals. So for example, you might be highlighting the health appeals, or you highlight the nutrition appeals, or you might be highlighting the taste appeal, or you might be highlighting what we say is more for the environmental appeals or community appeals, right? Like it's helping the farms, it's helping local farmers. So there could be lots of appeals you could use. I think it's just when you are doing those more baby photos, if that seems to be like in conflict with what your company is trying to sell, then I think just you have to be careful with how you frame those photos, right? Because when people see that, the way, because I think for social media for social media creators, you get to decide how you want to frame, and then you get to decide how you dominate the theme of your post or of your visual. So I would say if you are an agritourism farm or when people associate your brand or associate your farm, most likely with more fun activities, less about products, I think definitely feel free to feature those because it's definitely safe and I think effective. However, if you are more is like from butchers, for example, then I would say yes, I would be more careful with those photos, especially, you know, I think it's more like you don't want to feature those photos and then kind of sell your products at the same time. And you are creating those kind of fun, like a conflict almost immediately.
Yeah, that's generally my advice too, is I think it's okay to show, especially in the Midwest. I get this question a lot from people in the Northeast, and maybe there is a different audience, like maybe they have slightly different attitudes there, but I think in the Midwest I've heard we're almost all less than 3 generations removed from the farm, or maybe it's more than 3. I can't remember now, but I feel like we're a little bit more surrounded by farms. Well, I tell people the same thing. It's okay to show pictures of your animals. Just, we might joke on the farm, oh, this new calf that we had is going to grow up and end up in the freezer. But you probably don't want to do that on your social media where you show a picture of a new calf and say, can't wait till he's in the freezer in 18 months or whatever it is. So
Also, maybe like for those farms, maybe it will be even more effective is they try to focus more on the product side, right? For example, if you can post like how your overall farm, how you keep it clean, or how nicely, or maybe not clean is the best word, but like how you keep it like organized in a way that people will feel is trustworthy, or you have a good management system. When you are promoting or doing Facebook or social media activities or branding, you have to think about what is the core value you're trying to deliver there. So I feel like for butchers, for example, cuteness is probably not where they want their product to be associated with or their farm image to be associated with. So maybe instead of going that route, they could find another route. Maybe they want people to trust their product. They want people to trust the process, or they want to instead they probably talk about animal welfare, for example. So I think it's more about thinking about what your core value is and how you want your brand to be known to your target audience and maybe focus on that instead. Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense and is a good guidelines regardless. So what did we miss? Did we miss any of the main points from your research so far, or have we covered most of them?
I think we've covered a lot. And also, one research is not really from my study, like my research, but it's more like what I read is I think if you are on social media, you could consider using paid social media, like advertisement. Actually, studies have shown that it is effective.
Dr. Sue, that's so perfect because in the last year or so, I've really spent a lot more time doing Meta ads and Google ads and have really found success with people. And that's actually something that we're launching as more of a service. I will say, when we try to teach about marketing, like we teach that yes, you can learn how to do social media yourself and you can learn how to do email marketing yourself. But I will say that ads management gets a lot more technical and is a little bit trickier. And so that's why for the most part, we're offering it as a service, not as an educational piece, because it's constantly changing. Meta has changed in the last week. They've now started giving me options to translate my ads into 12 different languages. That option was not there a week ago. So I swear if I made an education, if I made a training about Meta ads, it would change by the time that I got it published.
And now with all of the AI tools, they'll give you even more additional options about using different AI algorithms to help you improve your efficiency. So just lots of choices there. So I agree. I think like a general training will be hard to really cover everything there.
Tell us about your AI research, and is that part of this next research that you're recruiting farmers for?
After AI was rolled out, and then I started kind of looking at AI, and we have some kind of AI research going on right now. So for example, because right now I think for those social media platforms, if you use AI to generate content, especially I think visuals, you have to disclose it. So we are trying to look at if you actually disclose it, you tell people, hey, it is AI generated, what is the effect there?
I am 100% sure that 99% of the farmers and butchers listening had no idea that they were supposed to disclose if they used AI to create. Do you agree, Sierra?
Yes, but I will say I have found that at least TikTok, you don't have to tell them that you used AI, they know.
They can tell.
And I know that because the main AI I use with photography is I like to just expand the background sometimes to make it work for my social graphics. So anyways, I all I did was expand the background, added like another few pixels of trees, and I put it on TikTok and it says content contains AI images. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, they're just calling it that now."
I mean, does it put some sort of a, this is going to sound so technical, like some sort of a stamp in the file? Or Dr. Sue, do you know how that works?
So I recently came across an article, I think it's from Instagram's like executive director or someone, like a higher position. They were actually talking about right now we label those AI content, right? Like a label either automatically or users like self-disclose it. But they say maybe in the future it will become everything we will automatically assume it is AI generated. And then it will become the era is you actually label human generated content. So if it is human generated, you will actually put a label there and say, hey, it is created by the real person, a real creator. And then they believe it, we are going there. So
I just started an ad for a client where we had a bunch of photos behind the scenes on the farm, actually behind the scenes in the butcher shop. We had photos of them cooking their meat, and I ran an ad and the caption literally says, this is not AI content. This is real behind the scenes showing the process that creates this amazing beef. And yeah, because I feel like you're right. You look at it and you don't know if it's real anymore.
So our research group is kind of looking at, like different effects there, and then when you disclose it or you don't disclose it, and how you disclose it. Because I think just saying AI generated right now is a really big blanket, right? Like you could use AI for lots of different purposes.
To Sierra's example, if I'm understanding, you added a little bit of trees so that it would fit the cropping better, but it's not like you changed the main subject of the photo or of the graphic.
I think it's like a photoshopping, right? So we are looking at that. And so right now we have studies that we are looking for farmers that we can talk to. We have two separate interviews we want to do. So the first one is about we want to know how farmers have been using social media in general for their marketing purposes. Either you are using either like more organic posting, or if you have ever used paid social media ads. So we just want to know like farmers' experiences, their barriers, to help us better understand how we can help them during that process. And we do have another kind of like separate interview is to look at or trying to understand how much farmers know about AI tools and how much they have already used AIs in their marketing practices. So we are looking for farmers and any type of farmers as well, as long as you have your social media accounts or you manage or you work with your social media team and you have that experience or perspective, we would love to talk to you. And we expect each interview will be about an hour long and it's going to be online. So you just have to kind of sign up. Oh, and then you have to be small and the medium sized. And then once you sign up, we'll ask you a few questions to make sure you kind of qualify. And then we'll just send you email about setting up a time, and then you talk to us for an hour, and then we'll pay $40 for 1 hour. So we are still looking farmers, and I know I've heard that, maybe you can correct me, like they say once after March, like farmers will get busier and busier. So we were trying to kind of talk to farmers before they get busy. So if anyone's interested, I can share the information with Katie and Sarah.
Is this just limited to Midwest farms or is it anywhere in the country?
Everyone, I mean, like here in the US will be fine. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I've got information from Dr. Sue on how your data will be used, how it will be kept private, and things like that as well.
Yeah, we try our best to protect our farmers, so we will not share their personal information, and everything will be aggregated, so people will not be able to tell the answers from certain farms. Yeah, so everything will be like kept anonymously.
I'd have to get all my clients' permission, of course, but with our advertising, I'd love to explore, have your research assistants look through all the posts and all the captions and which ones were, we can tell in meta ads what's working best, but I can't always pinpoint. I can say that ad number 2 worked better than ad number 1, but I can't always pinpoint why that is. And so it would be interesting to have you start to look at these trends or, and say, well, Katie, this ad did have a face in it and that one didn't. Or this one mentioned environmental stewardship as a value and this one mentioned, something different or.
That'll be amazing because to us is what we can do right now. So we can only collect data that's publicly available. And then lots of data you talk about, it's more like back-end data, which we have no access to. So if you have data you are willing to share with us, we'll be happy to kind of like do analysis and we can talk about, what makes it work, what makes it not, using more research perspective. And even if like sometimes is we can do experiments too. Like we can actually test it with potential consumers and to see whether certain type of like images work better. Yeah, so I'm happy to chat more, like to talk about if you have any other things you want to know, and then we can see how we can work together.
We definitely should do that because I can think of so many questions. I have so many questions that I would love to have you and your team help answer through data. I used to have, in my old office, I had a little sign. It had a beautiful photo of a calf with this beautiful like sunset behind it. It was this gorgeous photo. And then I put some text on it that said, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." And that hung on my office wall and guided my work. And I still feel like that does guide my work. So we do our annual survey, but what you have done really going in and analyzing the posts is just so interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's lots of work, but I hope it is helpful for the, like the farmer community, because overall our ultimate goal is to help the community, right? To help them do things more efficiently and find it easier and less challenging. So hopefully, yeah, we are getting there.
So we will send out info. Is there a place where you have kind of your research summarized so that farmers could go and look back at?
We are going to publish our, so it's more like academic outlets. So once we are published, it's probably taking a while. And after it's published, I'm happy to share the copy as well as create some flyers or infographic out of those, and I can share with you. But it'll probably take a while because the whole process is very lengthy.
Well, we'll just have to have you back on the podcast again when you have more information to share.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about like our findings related to AI, especially if I get enough participants for our interviews. I'm happy to come back and share more. And I forgot to mention is the study is open to any type of farmer. So it doesn't have to be just butchers, but so if they have friends who are like managing other type of farms, they are more than welcome to share with anyone they know.
Fantastic. This was such a great interview. Really got my wheels turning. You too, Sierra?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Sue, and we will hopefully talk again soon.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Dr. Sue.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meat Success. We hope this episode gave you fresh insights and inspiration to beef up your meat marketing. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and share with your fellow farmers and butchers. Have questions or ideas for future podcasts? Reach out to ChopLocalUniversity.com. Until next time, remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success.